Tonight, the United States escalates its immigration crackdown, halting all applications from 19 non-European countries while deploying large federal teams into New Orleans. Washington says the measures follow a deadly incident involving an asylum applicant, but human rights groups warn of sweeping consequences. A nationwide crackdown, but how far will it go? Good evening. Washington's moves are now being felt on the ground. In New Orleans, federal agents have launched one of the largest operations of the year, while at the same time, the administration has frozen immigration processing for nationals of 19 countries. Well, together, these decisions mark a sharper, more assertive phase in US policy. Here's how the day unfolded.
Federal agents swept into New Orleans on Wednesday as the Trump administration opened a new front in its nationwide immigration crackdown. About 250 agents are taking part in Operation Catahoula Crunch, targeting immigrants released from local custody after arrests for crimes such as armed robbery, home invasion and rape. Masked Border Patrol teams were seen patrolling Latino neighborhoods and making arrests across New Orleans, Metairie, La Place and Gretna. At the same time, the Trump administration has suspended all immigration applications from nationals of 19 countries already under US travel restrictions, freezing green card and citizenship processing. The pause affects countries including Somalia, Sudan, Iran, Eritrea, Haiti, Yemen, Libya and Myanmar. The move has sparked backlash abroad. In Mogadishu, residents say the policy unfairly targets whole communities, while in Togo, travel agencies report that visa applications stopping overnight, disrupting business and travel plans.
Since Togo's ban, there are no more visa applicants. This already affects part of our core revenue. We handle ticketing naturally, and so with no more travelers, the business has already taken a hit.
The White House has defended the measures as necessary for national security following last week's attack on U.S. National Guard members in Washington. President Trump has also criticized Somali immigrants and their participation in welfare programs.
I hear they ripped off Somalians, ripped off that state for billions of dollars, billions, every year, billions of dollars, and they contribute nothing. The welfare is like 88%. They contribute nothing. I don't want them in our country, I'll be honest with you.
Since January, Trump has made immigration enforcement a priority, expanding raids, tightening asylum rules and imposing travel restrictions.
Well, joining me now to delve deeper into this topic is A-News's Katie Wilson. Katie, good to see you here in the studio. Tell us about this incident then that the White House is pointing to as the moment that triggered this sweeping pause on immigration cases.
Yes, so the White House is saying that this pause was triggered by the shooting of 2 US National Guard members in Washington, D.C. by an Afghan national. Now that took place last Wednesday. If you remember, one of those died on Thursday and the other is still in a serious condition over a week later after being critically wounded. The Department of Homeland Security has named the suspect as Rahman Ullah Lakanwal and described him as a criminal alien from Afghanistan. That was their words. And he reportedly came to the US in September 2021 under a program for Afghanistan, from people from Afghanistan named Operation Allies Welcome, and that existed during the Biden presidency. And that makes him one of around 77,000 Afghans who entered the US under these special immigration procedures. They were in place for about a year following the US withdrawal, and I'm sure you remember as the Taliban took back control of the country, there were fears against retribution of those who had cooperated with the US. So the suspect is said to have worked with US intelligence agencies whilst in Afghanistan. So because of this incident, the administration has ordered a thorough re-review of immigration applications from nationals of 19 countries of concern. And that means pausing all pending asylum, green card and citizenship cases from these countries. And the Trump administration says that even the fact that this suspect was granted asylum in the first place, that's evidence of insufficient vetting, so why they're introducing these measures. Now, these 19 countries already had special restrictions in June. The Trump administration imposed a travel ban or partial restrictions on them under a proclamation citing national security and risk factors. So even before this shooting, the government was preparing to review immigrant and refugee cases from these countries of concern. So this does reflect a longer-term push to reshape immigration screening and enforcement. So yes, this shooting was the catalyst and a sort of what tipped the balance moment, but this is part of a broader trajectory. And as I say, the government appears to be using this incident to justify and accelerate a wider crackdown on immigration and tightening those vetting procedures for particular nationalities.
And on the Afghanistan side, we know that the foreign minister has made some remarks, and our correspondent in Afghanistan filed a report earlier today. Let's just have a quick look at that.
Speaking at a gathering of political analysts at Afghanistan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Minister Amir Khan Muttaqi addressed the violent incident in Washington head-on. He said the shooting was an individual act and, in his words, had nothing to do with Afghanistan. Muttaqi went further, saying the suspect had been trained by the United States and brought into the country through what he described as an illegal process that violated international law. He also drew parallels to Afghanistan's own recent history, claiming thousands of similar killings were carried out by individuals with comparable backgrounds over the past 2 decades. Meanwhile, in the United States, the Department of Homeland Security has announced the arrest of Jan Shah Safi, an Afghan national whose application for temporary protection status had been terminated. DHS officials say Safi was detained in Virginia on charges of supporting ISIS-K. According to US authorities, Safi is also accused of supplying weapons to his father, identified as a commander of a militia group in Afghanistan. The announcement comes amid heightened scrutiny of Afghan nationals who entered the US following the withdrawal of American forces in 2021, a process that brought tens of thousands of evacuees to American soil. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Katie, I imagine this is going to be quite a complex process to administrate. Of course, you'll have people who were already in the system, you'll have new cases. What do we know about the detail of the channels, the areas that are going to be most affected?
Well, that's the significant thing here, in that it's not just new applications. This is also affecting people in the system already. So the pause applies to anyone currently submitting or planning to submit applications from those 19 countries of concern. So asylum applications, permanent residency applications, that's a green card, citizenship applications or certain visa categories, and applicants from these countries will see that processing suspended until the administration completes a thorough re-review of vetting procedures. So in a nutshell, you could have a job offer from an American company or a place at an American university. Your employer could have filed your paperwork to bring you to the US, but then the channel to submit for your work visa has now been frozen, and we don't know how long that will be in place. So, very uncertain times for these people affected. And as I say, the significant thing about this is that this policy isn't just stopping new submissions. So pending asylum claims are put on hold, green card applications already under review are paused, citizenship applications awaiting approval are temporarily frozen. So if you're already in the US, that could disrupt your ability to work, access services or travel. And even cases that were previously approved or nearly completed, they may be re-evaluated for these security concerns. Now, just to be clear, if you're already in the US on valid visas, we're not talking about immediate removal, but it's if you're applying to adjust your immigration status, so maybe going from being a resident to being a citizen, that's what could be flagged. And this re-vetting is something that the Trump administration is emphasising. So some applicants might face additional interviews, background checks, or security screenings. And we're talking lengthy delays, more than likely, approvals possibly being rescinded if new issues are flagged. So this is a system-wide re-examination of immigration channels tied to these 19 countries.
And of course, Katie, 19 countries, I suppose in one sense doesn't sound like a lot, but of course each of those countries are in different parts of the world. So there's a ripple effect, I guess, in terms of the impact. Just talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, you're right. This is cross-continental, so it's covering parts of Central Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and the Caribbean and South America. And even Turkmenistan is one of these countries that's just across the Caspian for us. And these are named countries of concern. So these are countries with existing travel restrictions or countries that have been flagged due to recent security incidents. And this list has largely been drawn from previous travel bans or immigration restrictions issued under US presidential proclamations, and these have cited terrorism, public safety, or inadequate security information. Now, 12 of these countries in June 2025, they were affected by a proclamation restricting or suspending entries for those nationals, and that was citing national security risks. And the current pause is building on that framework. So it's, as I say, temporarily halting applications for nationals from those countries while those broader reviews are conducted. So because it is coming from prior executive and policy actions aimed at this security, it's more of a reinforcement in expanding following this triggering incident. So arguably there's some level of precedent. You know, these countries have seen this before. It hasn't come from nowhere. But on the other hand, it's affecting tens of thousands of people globally. So individuals already living in the US, families seeking reunification, and new applicants abroad seeking a visa or even claiming asylum. So even these minor delays in processing can have a massive impact on employment, education, families, travel.
Yeah, indeed. And Katie, any sense yet on when the pause might come to an end? Will it turn into a full stop, if you like, or have dates or periods of time been mentioned at all?
So the short answer to that is no. All of the available signals from the Trump administration suggest that the pause is indefinite, and there's been no concrete end date yet on record. And the policy memo is even offering no timetable on this. And if we take a look at the rhetoric that the Trump administration is using, they're talking about permanently pausing migration from third world countries. So there's been no public commitment there to reopen processing on any specific day or to ever resume business as usual. And, you know, we should be asking ourselves, we've got the midterms coming up next year. Is there any political benefit to Trump ending this before the midterms? Well, given Trump's core supporters are anti-immigration, ending it would be quite risky, and he won't want to alienate that core base by reversing this policy before the midterms. And one of the reasons Trump won the election was that harsh stance on immigration. So it's quite hard to imagine Trump softening on this ahead of the midterms. And legal observers as well are taking a look at this pause, and they're interpreting it as potentially long-lasting, at least until this review of security and public safety threats is completed, because it's unclear in legal terms what a permanent pause actually means in terms of deadlines, review cycles. So all indications are that this isn't going to end anytime soon.
And of course that lack of certainty, Katie, as you've already outlined, affects people's lives. It's difficult and worrying and often problematic process, isn't it, to have to go through. What have we heard from other governments, from human rights groups about their concerns about this going on?
Well, the United Nations bodies, including the Human Rights Office and the Refugee Agency, they've publicly urged Washington to keep its asylum and refugee channels open. They emphasise that people seeking protection are entitled to it under international law, and they must be granted that process regardless of isolated incidents. And there is concern that this sweeping freeze could violate international obligations to refugees and asylum seekers, but obviously this isn't the first time that we've seen the Trump administration step away from those international norms. So human rights organisations are echoing this, and they're saying that the policy amounts to collective punishment and effectively scapegoating entire nationalities because of this incident. And their focus is on the humanitarian consequences. There's lawyers working with immigrant communities that warn that many people, including lawful permanent residents and asylum seekers, they're being thrown into a legal limbo here without an end in sight. There is support for this, but it's coming from a narrower political base. We're talking state level Republican officials rather than a broad consensus. And obviously for those prioritising strict immigration and security, this pause is a signal that the administration is delivering on those promises that they made in the election. But outside of that base, it's generally being viewed as discriminatory or collective punishment. Now, some governments that have been affected by prior travel bans voiced concern at the time. They've kept largely quiet now. So after that June ban on 12 countries that I mentioned, now many of those overlap with the 19, Venezuela warned that being in the US had become risky for its citizens. And obviously, we've seen those tensions between the US and Venezuela escalate since. Somalia, one of the countries on the list, they were a bit more diplomatic back in June. Its ambassador to the US said Somalia values its long-standing relationship with the United States and expressed a readiness to engage in dialogue over security concerns. But obviously, that was before those remarks from Trump that we saw
that were less than diplomatic.
Exactly. So it remains to be seen whether that is going to change, but we can certainly expect more reaction to this in the coming days.
Katie, it's a fascinating story, and we thank you very much for covering it so thoroughly. Thank you. Okay, after the break, we look at President Aliyev's talks with the visiting UK Defence Minister as both sides signal interest in moving their partnership to a deeper strategic level. Do stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching PrimeTime. President Ilham Aliyev has welcomed the UK Minister of State for Defence, Lord Vernon Coker, for discussions aimed at strengthening cooperation between Azerbaijan and the United Kingdom. Well, Lord Coker delivered greetings from Prime Minister Keir Starmer and signalled London's interest in taking the relationship with Baku toward a broader strategic partnership. President Aliyev referenced his recent meeting with Starmer at COP29, noting the long-standing and trust-based ties between the two countries. During the talks, Lord Coker also praised the progress made in Washington in August on steps toward normalization between Azerbaijan and Armenia. President Aliyev welcomed that recognition, describing the developments as historically significant and highlighting the role of President Donald Trump. He reaffirmed that Azerbaijan initiated the peace agenda and intends to drive it forward. Well, joining me now to discuss this further here in the studio is the host of Inside Politics and Frontline, Anastasia Lavrina. Anastasia, always good to see you.
Thank you so much.
And President Aliyev spoke of a new chapter, didn't he, in defence industry ties. What does that involve and why now?
Well, I think it was expected because the United Kingdom's first resident defense attaché in Azerbaijan was appointed in March 2025. Therefore, there were so much talks among the experts that we should expect the intensification in between of two countries, especially in defense sphere, defense and security cooperations. And just a month before, if I'm not mistaken, the first Azerbaijan-UK policy dialogue was held at ADU University, where the participants from the United Kingdom also spoke about the importance of the development cooperation in defense sphere. Well, it's a good example when diplomatic relations are being upgraded to strategic partnership. It's very timely when two countries are willing to move from a dialogue to practical cooperation. So a new chapter actually implies this practical cooperation in a sphere like maybe co-production of technology for a near future, then line set manufacturing and training programs. Taking into account announced the willingness of Azerbaijan to work more closely with the NATO countries in accordance to modernize its standards in accordance with NATO standards, then it was quite expected that Azerbaijan will be also willing to increase the level of partnership with the United Kingdom. Then, if I'm not mistaken, just recently there were also some talks about Azerbaijan and UK ways for the future partnership in a sphere like military education programs and, as I mentioned before, the NATO partnership framework. I will say it's very timely. Since the time when Azerbaijan and Armenia resolved the issues and as you also mentioned, the Washington meetings in August this year, the new geopolitical reality is being developed in the region. It's Azerbaijan who is looking for new partners, for new ways of cooperation with many countries in the region and far beyond, including the European Union and the United Kingdom and the United States. And the United Kingdom has its own interest in the region far before. The Caspian region, the region of the South Caucasus. So now it's really indeed very good opportunity for the United Kingdom to increase its presence and to work together with the countries like Azerbaijan and Turkey in a sphere of modernization and upgrading the skills in the defense and security spheres.
Yeah, new opportunities, as you say, and also a new way of thinking about what partnership between these two countries actually means. It's about moving beyond just energy, isn't it, into all sorts of other areas too. How significant do you think that shift, that potential upgrading of the relationship into broader areas is going to be in terms of the ongoing bilateral relationship?
Well, indeed, it will start probably as a bilateral, but as I mentioned before, maybe the countries like Turkey will be also in this cooperation for the future. A month before, Turkey and the United Kingdom also discussed the ways to increase the level of cooperation in the defense sphere, in the sphere of manufacturing the fighter jets and etc. So this time, indeed, we see the significant movement. The relations between the United Kingdom and Azerbaijan, as it was also mentioned by the President Ilham Aliyev, started from in energy sphere in the 19th. We all do remember that British Petroleum has been the largest foreign investor in Azerbaijan since the 90s. From the contract of the century, 1994, then the contract agreement like the investigation of Shah Deniz or Azeri-Chirag-Güneşli, and later on the Southern Gas Corridor. The Southern Gas Corridor project was widely supported by the United Kingdom as well as the United States, since it helps the European to diversify the suppliers. Now the relationship are moving to the defense, security, education, climate policy. In COP29, when Keir Starmer also met with the president in Baku, it was also mentioned that two states may work closely in a way of green transition and the future, let's say, export of the green energy from Azerbaijan, from the Caspian Sea to European Union. The Caspian region, as I already mentioned, was always in the interest of the United Kingdom because of its energy, because of its geopolitical significance, but due to the interest of other powers in the region, like Iran and Russia, for example, they had been some complicated issues and the United Kingdom could not increase its presence. But now there are two issues actually which is very important to mention. The first, for the UK, it's important to be here, it's important to develop relations on the mutually beneficial basement because of the conflict around Russia and Ukraine. In any further development, UK wants to also increase its security presence in the region and in cooperation help to Azerbaijan, let's say even to foster its independent and a security policy in the region. And the second issue, of course, there are more opportunities now because other countries are dealing with their own global issues or the domestic issues. So there is a good platform for the UK to involved in any kind of project which will be developed in the region, starting from energy security. And where there is an energy, there is always a big question of security. European Union also needs a guarantee that the project which they are investing at the moment will be secured in the near future. And probably this type of cooperation will be definitely a good guarantee for the European Union that the projects will be secured.
And in the world of diplomacy, Anastasia, as you know better than most, very little is done incidentally. Everything is done with a deliberate purpose, isn't it? So let's just examine the key elements of this meeting. Lord Coker himself is the Minister of State for Defence. He's a very senior figure. He's served in the Blair government, the Brown government. He's got a huge amount of experience. The very fact that he came has significance attached to it. He also brought with him the very best wishes from Keir Starmer, the UK Prime Minister. What do you think that shows? I mean, the UK is clearly taking this very seriously, isn't it?
Indeed, it's a high-level endorsement, and this visit is also not only the way to think about the future development of the defense cooperation, but to show that the UK considers Azerbaijan as a very important, significant player in the region, who is now working on the diversification of its policy in energy sphere, and also looking for new partners who will help to sustain the, I will say, fragile peace in the region, especially after, again, the resolution of the long-lasting conflict between two countries. Azerbaijan is now creating a new architecture in the region with all of those reconstruction work which is now being held in the Karabakh and East Zangezur, with all of those countries who are willing to develop Azerbaijan on a mutually beneficial cooperation, mutually beneficial way. And the position Azerbaijan has within the international organization, from the chairmanship of the non-aligned movement, then hosting COP29, and also being a very reliable partner for, I would say, many European countries. Then for the UK, they do really consider the president himself as a very strong figure in the global politics, not only in the region but on the global arena. Do you remember how many initiatives President of Azerbaijan brought on discussion in the United Nations, even during the pandemic COVID-19, which was also highly welcomed by the superpowers, considering Azerbaijan as a geographically small but a very, very important country in the region. Its geographical position, its position as a hub for many transport and energy corridors in the region, and also Zangezur corridor, or how in Washington is being called as a Trump corridor. Well, in the case of, I would say, its implementation in near future, then it will definitely benefit all the countries, and there are more and more those who are willing to be a part of this project, who will reconstruct the geopolitics in the region. Therefore, I'm not surprised actually, but I would like to highlight here three key messages which this actually visit may lead to. I guess UK is signaling about readiness to upgrade defense cooperation. That's the first. The second is the confidence in Azerbaijan's stability and its willingness and capacity to keep and promote the independent policy. And the third, interest in shaping the evolving security landscape of the South Caucasus.
And there was high praise, wasn't there, from the UK delegation about the progress since the Washington summit, as you say. What developments were there, and what developments are we expecting when it comes to UK's possible involvement in the ongoing peace process and the reconstruction efforts that are already underway?
The first and the main one since this meeting, I guess, after this meeting, it's a cooperation in the security and defense sphere. I guess this is one of the key elements what we need now to make sure that all of those agreements reached in Washington August 8th are implemented and two countries are following them. If in the case of successful finalization of all issues related to the Zangezur corridor, security matters, and we will need some guarantee for that, because honestly, Armenia, it's not that much predictable partner. Therefore, there should be some guarantees from outside, even though two countries, Azerbaijan and Armenia, are having direct talks now without any involvement from outside. It's important to mention, just recently, you know yourself, OEC Minsk group is no longer valid and was officially dissolved. So two countries just rely on their own future in future talks and negotiations. So why not, if the United Kingdom also foster defense cooperation with Azerbaijan to have somehow guarantees for the future? Then the reconstruction, Azerbaijan have a lot of investment in the reconstruction process of Karabakh and East Zangezur. Immediately after the war ended in 2020, we do remember that it was only Azerbaijan who invested most. I would say the only investor in the beginning. And it was significant amount of money because all the cities were completely destroyed during the period of occupation. Then the Turkic states also joined the process. We do remember have the organization of Turkic states involved, and every single country preferred to invest in the development and reconstruction and the building of any kind of project there. But now in 2025, especially after the agreement reached in the UK, more and more European countries, Italian companies, are willing to be more actively presented there. So British companies for the future also can join this process, especially taking into account their experience in energy sphere. Green energy in the Karabakh is now among the top priorities. So why not, if British company to involve this process and also support the growing international support for peace, which is led by the United States President in his official statements.
And just finally, Anastasia, did you get a sense from what we've seen that both sides, both the UK and Azerbaijan, that they see the challenge, they see the opportunity of a peaceful and prosperous region, that they see that in the same way? Is there alignment in the way that both sides are framing what's ahead?
Yes, as for now, you previously mentioned also the meeting between the Prime Minister of UK and Azerbaijani President before. If I'm not mistaken, we had quite stable, predictable and good relations with the United Kingdom, with all new prime ministers who are taking their position in the United Kingdom. We had some maybe misunderstanding and disagreements with some separate issues, but overall from the global perspective, especially now, two sides do support the peaceful and stable development in the region. That's a must and that's a top priority for everyone. Then the second issue is energy policy of Azerbaijan. UK is willing to support Azerbaijan in its future initiative from the fossil fuel perspectives or the green energy. The South and Gas Corridor, in case of successful enlargement in the future, it will benefit all European countries, and UK, we must say it, is willing to see Europe less depend on Russian fossil fuels. So Azerbaijan is a real partner for that. Then Azerbaijan has a good geographical position, but quite complicated because of its border with Russia and Iran. And we do know the situation and the approach UK has for two of these countries. So having a strong partner in the region and supporting its defense development, improvement, and etc., it also benefits and it also coincides with the interest of the United Kingdom from the global perspective and from the perspective as one of the strongest members of NATO. And Turkey, Azerbaijan, two brotherly countries who is having quite a strong position on the global arena. Turkey is a member of NATO and UK is fostering its defense cooperation with Turkey, as I mentioned before. So with Turkey, meaning with Azerbaijan as well, and Azerbaijan's position in other parts of regions, let's say in the Middle East, in Africa, in Asia with China. So UK is willing to have such a strong partner on its own side and willing to support its development. But what is really important, and I want to highlight it once again, these relations are being built on trust and mutual benefits. Not like someone is going to dictate something to another side. Mutually beneficial cooperation.
Yes, very interesting indeed. Trust and mutual benefits. Anastasia, we thank you very much as always
for coming in.
Thank you. Okay, after the break, we take a look at the top business stories shaping the week with Andy Mioch. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Prime Time. Now, Andy Mioch is here with the very latest business news. Andy, what's on the agenda tonight?
Well, tonight we'll be taking a look at a new lawsuit against the US government over the tariffs, a flurry of stories on apps and governments across the globe, and there's some news in the deliveries and the auto sector as well. So let's have a look. First up, Costco has filed a lawsuit against the U.S. government to secure refunds in case the Supreme Court rejects President Donald Trump's authority to impose tariffs. The country's largest warehouse club operator has now joined dozens of companies suing to safeguard potential refunds.
Costco has sued the US government to ensure it will receive refunds if the Supreme Court rejects President Donald Trump's bid for sweeping authority to impose tariffs. In a complaint filed on Friday in the US Court of International Trade in Manhattan, Costco said Trump's use of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to impose tariffs left it uncertain whether businesses can recoup sums they should not have paid. The nation's largest warehouse club operator said US Customs and Border Protection denied its request for more time to make final calculations of tariffs owed, threatening its right to complete refunds even if the Supreme Court rules against Trump. Customs and Border Protection had no immediate comment. Based in Issaquah, Washington, Costco joined dozens of companies suing to safeguard potential refunds. It is also among the largest, with $275.2 billion of revenue in its fiscal year ending August 31st. Other companies that have sued to preserve refunds include Bumblebee Foods, Ray-Ban eyeglass maker EssilorLuxottica, Kawasaki Motors, Revlon and Yokohama Tire. During oral arguments on November 5th, Supreme Court justices from both sides of the political spectrum asked skeptical questions about whether Trump legally used the 1977 Emergency Powers Law to impose tariffs. The justices took the case on an accelerated basis, but have not said when they will rule. Costco has taken multiple steps to address tariffs, including by reducing the number of suppliers and relying more on local sourcing and its in-house Kirkland brand.
The European Commission has launched a new antitrust investigation into Meta platforms over its integration of AI features into WhatsApp. The Brussels probe comes at a time when Italy's antitrust watchdog is already investigating Meta over its AI uses.
Brussels has opened a new antitrust investigation into Meta platforms over its rollout of artificial intelligence features in WhatsApp, the European Commission said on Thursday, reflecting rising scrutiny of big tech's use of generative AI. The move, reported earlier by Reuters and the Financial Times, marks the latest action by European regulators against large technology firms as the bloc seeks to balance support for the sector with efforts to curb its expanding influence. The European Commission opened the investigation into Meta's new policy regarding AI providers' access to WhatsApp after the California-based company integrated its Meta AI system into the messaging service earlier this year. A WhatsApp spokesperson said that the claims are baseless. Meta AI, a chatbot and virtual assistant, has been built into WhatsApp's interface since March 2025 across European markets. Italy's antitrust watchdog opened a parallel investigation in July into allegations that Meta leveraged its market power by integrating an AI tool into WhatsApp. The probe was expanded in November to examine whether Meta further abused its dominance by blocking rival AI chatbots from the messaging platform.
Still with apps, Russia has blocked Apple's FaceTime amid a crackdown on foreign tech platforms it alleges are being used for criminal activities. The move follows restrictions on YouTube, WhatsApp, and Telegram, and critics say the curbs amount to censorship.
Russia has blocked Apple's video calling app FaceTime, the state communications watchdog said on Thursday, as part of an accelerating clampdown on foreign tech platforms that authorities allege are being used for criminal activity. The move follows restrictions against Google's YouTube, Meta's WhatsApp, and the Telegram messaging service. Critics say the curbs amount to censorship and a tightening of state control over private communications. Russia says they are legitimate law enforcement measures. Russian authorities have this year launched a state-backed rival app called Max, which critics say could be used for surveillance, allegations that state media have dismissed as false. Justifying its decision, the communications regulator said in an emailed statement that according to law enforcement agencies, FaceTime is being used to organise and carry out terrorist attacks in the country, recruit perpetrators and commit fraud and other crimes against Russian citizens. The watchdog did not cite evidence in support of the allegations. Apple representatives did not immediately respond to requests for comment.
Over in India, the government has retracted an order mandating all smartphones to install a state-owned security app after pushback by major tech companies and the opposition. The order from last week raised concerns that the app could be used as a mass surveillance tool.
India's government has backtracked on an order for all smartphones to be pre-installed with a state-owned security app after a mass outcry over privacy concerns and refusal by technology companies to comply. The Department of Telecommunications confirmed it had revoked its previous order for all technology companies to mandatorily install the government's Sanchar Sathi cybersecurity app onto every smartphone in India within 90 days. Political outcry erupted over the order, and several tech companies, including Apple and Google, made it clear they would not comply due to privacy concerns. In a statement on Wednesday afternoon, the government confirmed it had decided not to make the pre-installation mandatory for mobile manufacturers. It emphasized that the app, which allows users to block and track lost or stolen mobile phones and report fraudulent calls, was secure and purely meant to help citizens against bad actors. The initial order, given quietly to tech companies last week, landed the government in hot water after internet privacy groups and the political opposition raised concerns that the app could be used as a mass surveillance tool. Apple and Google anonymously briefed the media that tech companies would be pushing back against the order, as the move raised privacy concerns for their operating systems and violated internal policies. Outcry erupted in Parliament on Wednesday, with opposition MPs accusing the government, led by the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, of violating citizens' basic right to privacy. The decision by the government to revoke the order was celebrated by groups advocating for online rights and privacy.
Back to the United States. According to media reports, Amazon plans to terminate its long-standing partnership with the U.S. Postal Service as it expands its own delivery network. The online retailer has long been USPS's top customer.
Amazon is planning to end its long-standing partnership with the U.S. Postal Service as the e-commerce giant prepares to expand its nationwide delivery network, the Washington Post reported on Thursday, citing 3 people with knowledge of the matter. The online retailer has long been the Postal Service's top customer, providing more than $6 billion in annual revenue in 2025, the report said. The potential move could massively hit financial prospects for the independent government agency that has heavily relied on contracts with large delivery customers, such as Amazon, to fuel growth amid deep losses. USPS posted a $9.5 billion loss last year and has accumulated more than $100 billion in losses since 2007, despite significant restructuring and legislative reforms. The e-commerce giant is planning to pull the billions of packages it sends through the Postal Service by the end of 2026. The plans are not final and could change, the report said.
And finally, for some auto industry news, Volvo has reported a 10% decline in November sales, attributing the slump to trade tariffs and waning demand in the U.S. market.
Sweden-based Volvo Cars on Wednesday reported a slump in November sales, continuing a decline this year amid pressure from trade tariffs and subdued demand in the United States. Volvo Cars, which is majority owned by China's Geely Holding, said in a statement it sold 60,244 cars in November, a 10% drop from a year earlier, taking its year-to-date decline in volume to 8%. The group, which is targeting a long-term operating profit margin of more than 8% as part of a recent strategy overhaul, said sales of fully electric cars rose 4% year-on-year to account for 24% of the overall volume. Sales of electrified cars as a whole, including plug-in hybrids, were down 5% to account for 50% of total sales volumes. Volvo Cars did not provide a regional breakdown of demand, but said US sales remained subdued following the country's phase-out of electric vehicle tax credits.
And that is a wrap on business, at least for today. Handing it back to you guys.
Very interesting stuff as always. Andy, thank you very much indeed. Okay, after the break, Turkey warns that rising Black Sea attacks now threaten key energy routes and regional stability. Do stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. Turkey is telling Russia and Ukraine to keep energy infrastructure out of their conflict and wants energy flows to continue uninterrupted after a series of attacks off Turkey's Black Sea coast. And Ankara says the escalating strikes pose a serious risk to navigation and stability in the region.
Ukraine is targeting Russia's oil exports, which it says funds the war, as Moscow bombards Kiev's power grid. Naval drones hit 2 Russian-linked oil tankers, the Kairos and Virat, in the Black Sea last week, damaging the vessels as they headed to Novorossiysk to load oil for export. The attacks also damaged infrastructure at the Caspian Pipeline Consortium terminal, halting operations. The strike prompted Kazakhstan to protest, calling them unacceptable and harmful to bilateral relations. Turkey, a NATO member, has kept warm relations with both Kiev and Moscow but calls the attacks unacceptable, warning both sides after discussing the issue at a NATO meeting on Wednesday. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan says the strikes are heightening security risks in the region. The recent attacks in the Black Sea in particular have demonstrated how justified the warnings we, as Turkey, have been making since the very beginning. Because the geography of the war is spreading, the methods used are becoming more widespread. This is a very scary thing. Now, because this attack on 2 vessels sailing at open sea within our exclusive economic zone actually endangers navigation safety in the Black Sea, it is making the Black Sea an area closed to trade. Another incident was reported on Tuesday when the tanker Mid-Volga 2 came under attack 80 nautical miles off Turkey's coastline while sailing from Russia to Georgia with sunflower oil. The vessel, which was en route to the port of Sinop on Turkey's central Black Sea coast, suffered no injuries among its 13 crew members. Russia condemned the strikes as terrorism, and President Vladimir Putin warned of retaliation against Ukrainian facilities and vessels. Both earlier hit tankers were reportedly subject to Western sanctions, and the attacks have disrupted shipping and pushed insurance rates higher across the region. Ukraine maintains that its operations target Russian military and economic assets, not third countries.
Staying with the Black Sea, and Turkey has warned that recent attacks are heightening regional security concerns. Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan underscored the growing risks to maritime navigation and trade within Turkey's exclusive economic zone and stressed the need for coordinated measures with regional neighbours and NATO.
The recent attacks in the Black Sea in particular have demonstrated how justified the warnings we, as Turkey, have been making since the very beginning. Because the geography of the war is spreading, the methods used are becoming more widespread. This is a very scary thing. Now, because this attack on 2 vessels sailing at open sea within our exclusive economic zone actually endangers navigation safety in the Black Sea, it is making the Black Sea an area closed to trade. It is turning it into an area closed to human transportation.
Well, joining me now to discuss this further is Hasan Erel, a journalist and writer who's based in Izmir, Turkey. Mr. Erel, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Primetime. Turkey then warning Moscow and Kyiv to keep energy infrastructure out of the conflict. What prompted this from Ankara?
Yes, actually, this attack on the oil tankers occurred in the economic, or we can say Turkish wider waters, these 2 attacks. So this is a attack on Turkey also. I mean, Turkey is not in this war. And Turkey doesn't acknowledge the embargo of United States and EU or United Kingdom. So this is a hostile action Ukraine against Turkey. But it's not only Ukraine. I mean, we know that from the beginning, all the naval war for Ukraine is controlled by the United Kingdom. The drones, the sea drones, are from the United Kingdom. So there's a bigger issue in this situation. The first one, it's against all the trade, the global trade. It's a hostile action on the global trade. And secondly, it's a hostile action towards against Turkey. We have to add that there's another incident in the Senegal. You know, it was a Turkish tanker, and it was sabotage in the sea. It was a Turkish tanker carrying Russian oil, which United States call illegally the shadow fleet, or what it's not written in the law and anywhere. Their media propaganda is only because Turkey, I repeat it, is not a side of this war. Turkey doesn't accept this embargo on Russian oil. So Turkey is not part of this war. Turkey is a NATO member.
As you rightly say, Hassan, there've been a series of attacks now, haven't there, on tankers? I mean, what do we know about the detail of these incidents? And actually, what do we think this says about the future risks that this may pose to shipping routes? Because, of course, a significant portion of the global economy is predicated on shipping routes. I mean, presumably the ripple effects of fear and uncertainty about the security of shipping routes could start to cause huge problems.
Of course. When we look at the history, even before the Second World War, in 1938, I think in Mediterranean or Mediterranean Sea and other seas, there was attacks against the shippings, trade ships, even in 1938. And nobody was aware of who was attacking these ships, but there was. It's the signal of the World War. It was the signal of the World War. The attacks against the global trade, especially in the sea shipping trade. So this kind of like that, but because we know that the United States is trying to make a deal with Russia and tries to end this war. I'm not sure it can happen, but we know that Trump is always saying that I will finish this, put an end to this Ukraine war. But United Kingdom and Europe is against this Trump's decision. So they try to sabotage the peace deal. So I think it's kind of a threat of the European NATO, or we can call them NATO without United States or whatever, because even the NATO is, I think, is coming to a decision time. You know, United States is not acting as a NATO member, and the other European countries and the United Kingdom is acting as another side or group. So we see that there's a big split in the West, and the usual suspect is always the British for me. And of course, we cannot ignore Germany and France, but especially I told you before that this place in Black Sea region and the Mediterranean is the Ukrainian naval force is organized by British Secret Service or Army. So it's kind of a threat against the world, global world trade and the peace, of course, because if nobody can be safe about the shipping, the trade will get a little, not little, a big problem.
I have to say your characterization of this coordinated effort by Europe, the UK, and others. There will be some, obviously, who disagree with that. What is indisputable, though, is that Turkey is facing a significant challenge as a result of what's happened. They're obviously stressing that oil and gas flows must remain uninterrupted. How is Turkey dealing with the pressure? How does it now make sure that those corridors remain open and remain secure?
Yeah, Turkey has some kind of power for this. You know, the Turkey is on the way on the corridor for grain corridor for Ukraine. So Turkey can close the grain corridor if they repeat these actions, because we know that another thing that proves this is against especially Turkey, because Turkey is buying oil and gas from Russia and Novorossiysk, and there's a Turkish stream, of course. They don't attack the Greek tankers, Greek ships, but the most of the oil from Russia is carrying by the Greek ships. But they don't attack the Greek ships. They attack the Turkish ship in Senegal and in the two Gambia, I think, but it's Russian ships in the Turkish region. So it shows the target of these attacks also. So Turkey can close this grain corridor. It's a very big deal for Ukraine, and we know that in Ukraine it's the government is coming to an end. Zelensky and his government and his best man, the Yermak, is now accused by big corruption, and it will goes to also the European countries. I think soon we will see this European Union will be, I think, questioned about this the money trafficking for Zelensky in this 3 years period. So there's a really serious panic in the room.
I was going to say, I mean, even for those who disagree with your analysis, one thing that is certain is that there is uncertainty, there's concern, there may in places be, as you say, that panic. What is the result of all of that on regional stability and security?
As I said before, it's not good. It's the beginning of maybe the wider war. I don't know. It's because the leaders are in a panic mood. If this Ukraine war comes to an end, there will be big questions, starting from Zelensky and the other leaders, and Trump is doing that. I mean, Trump knows how will be the consequences after the finishing of end of this war. So everybody will be questioned. So these people will lose their seats. So they are trying to sabotage the peace plan, and they are trying to make a threat to everyone that they can do very bad things if the Trump or the other or Russia or pushing their way too much.
Okay.
Even they, talking about the preemptive strike. There's an Italian admiral was talking about this preemptive strike, especially NATO guy. So we can say that he's talking not for United States, but he's talking for European NATO. So there's a big split in the West. So everything can happen. We are in a situation it's very look-alike before the Second World War, because the economic situation, the global economy is not good. There's a crisis. We can see that from the silver and gold prices, and the pressure is getting bigger and bigger every day. This attacks is also a sign of that.
Okay,
I think.
Mr. Erel, it's been very interesting hearing your analysis. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Okay, after the break, we check in with our correspondents around the world for the very latest developments from their regions. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Prime Time. Let's go now to some of our correspondents all around the world. The president of Kyrgyzstan is visiting Pakistan after 20 years. Now, the visit comes as Islamabad looks to Central Asian countries for investment and to secure financial partnerships to turn around its ailing economy. Hira Mustafa reports now from Islamabad.
This is Kyrgyz President Sadir Japarov's first visit to Pakistan in 2 decades, with both sides hoping to boost trade and advance energy and transport projects linking Central and South Asia. During the visit, the two countries signed 15 pacts covering energy, trade, connectivity, and other key sectors. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif said these agreements could raise bilateral trade from just over $15 million to $200 million within 2 years. President Japarov was welcomed with a guard of honor at the Prime Minister's house on Thursday and was received by Pakistan's president at New Khan Air Base on Wednesday. He is accompanied by senior ministers, officials, and business leaders. Pakistani authorities say the country is ready to serve as a maritime base for landlocked Kyrgyzstan, providing access to Karachi's Port Qasim and Gwadar in the southwest of the country to help Kyrgyz goods reach regional and international markets. The Kyrgyz president praised Pakistan for being a key partner. He also said the Central Asia, South Asia electricity transmission and trade project is essential for a unified regional energy network. Beyond traditional sectors, both countries are exploring collaboration in digital finance, blockchain and cryptocurrency. Analysts say the engagement signals a favorable strategic shift by Islamabad. Cultivating deeper ties with Kyrgyzstan presents a valuable opportunity for economic expansion at a time when the country is relying on a $7 billion loan program by the IMF to stabilize its fragile economy. Hira Mustafa for A News in Islamabad.
Iran launched naval military exercises in its southern waters on Thursday and at the same time concluded hosting the joint counter-terrorism drills of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization to northwest of the country. A News' Touraj Shiralilo has more.
Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps staged 2-day naval drills in the Persian Gulf and Oman Sea waters on Thursday, and also launched the final stage of the joint anti-terror exercise participated by the special units of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization member states. The naval exercise, codenamed Shahid Nazeri, is named after commander of the elite units of the IRGC Navy and is covering the maritime theater in the Persian Gulf, the Hormuz Strait, and the Sea of Oman. The Strait of Hormuz, in which Iran is staging the war games today and tomorrow, connects the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman and is a key waterway for the transit of oil and natural gas to global markets. Iran has at times warned that it could restrict the strait's traffic during heightened tension. Also on Thursday, Shanghai Cooperation Organization concluded the 5-day Sahan 2025 anti-terrorism drills carried out in Iran's East Azerbaijan province. Defa Press website, which covers military and defense news, quoted IRGC sources saying that the last day of the joint war games focused on hostage release tactics as well as cross-border counter-terrorism operation. Turaj Shiralilu, Tehran, A News.
Kazakhstan aims to become a major air cargo hub connecting Europe and Asia. President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev is pushing for a modern multimodal logistics network to boost transit flows and regional trade. Our correspondent in Kazakhstan, Fariza Kalamazina, has more now on this story.
In Central Asia and the South Caucasus, competition for transit flows is intensifying. At the same time, there is a growing struggle for investments in the transport and logistics sector. This was stated by Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, who emphasized that if bold and decisive steps are not taken today, Kazakhstan risks missing its opportunities. This position was voiced at a meeting in Akorda dedicated to the development of regional air cargo hubs. Tokayev noted that currently the main freight transportation through the country is carried out by road and rail. At the same time, he said the share of air cargo is expected to grow every year, and by 2040, according to the president, 20% of air cargo will be on the Asia-Europe route. In this context, Tokayev stressed that Kazakhstan needs to develop a multimodal logistics framework that integrates road and rail with air transport. And given the country's location at the intersection of key air corridors between Europe and Asia, this potential must be utilized as efficiently and rationally as possible. Kassym-Jomart Tokayev identified the creation of fully fledged air hubs at the country's key airports as a top priority. And in addition, the head of state instructed that issues related to aviation fuel be resolved once and for all. According to him, the development of the sector is hindered by two main problems, high prices and insufficient domestic production. At the same time, Kazakhstan's geographic position at the center of Eurasia allows it to serve as a logistics hub, handling up to 80% of all overland transit between Asia and Europe. Fariza Kalamazina, Almaty, A News.
A new defence deal between the UK and Norway will see joint patrols by both nations' navies to protect undersea infrastructure and track Russian submarines. Now, the UK government claims there's been a 30% increase in Russian vessels threatening UK waters in the past 2 years. Stuart Smith reports now from London.
Both countries are founding members of the NATO military alliance and share responsibility for patrolling what's called the Greenland-Iceland-UK gap, a vast area of ocean that Russia would need to pass through to reach the Atlantic from its northern naval bases. A few weeks ago, an alleged Russian intelligence gathering ship was tracked by British aircraft as it surveyed the waters around Scotland. But Russian submarines also regularly patrol these waters. As an island nation, the UK is particularly vulnerable to any attempt at undersea sabotage, as it receives and exports energy through oil, gas and electricity connections to mainland Europe, and has telecoms connections too. Speaking about the new deal, Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Støre noted the two countries share waters, share a strategic environment and share a very like-minded reading of the security challenges. The UK Defence Secretary said this is an attempt to respond to Russian activity in the North Atlantic and other new threats through hard power and strong alliances. The two navies will deploy the same type of British-made warship, which will specialise in anti-submarine technology. They're under construction in the UK, but when finished, it's planned these Type 26 frigates will be able to share maintenance facilities and technology. The deal also comes with plans to develop better autonomous and uncrewed mine hunting systems like underwater drones. Stuart Smith for A News in London.
After the break, Fidan Sayadli will be showing us all the latest trending social media posts. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Prime Time now. Fidan Sayadli is here to dive into the world of social media. Fidan, what's on the agenda tonight?
Hello, Guy. There has been a lot happening, some heartbreaking, some shocking, some that will bring a smile or a bit of holiday cheer. Let's take a look together. We are starting with some heartbreaking news from Gaza. An Israeli airstrike hit the Al-Mawazi displacement area in Khan Yunis, killing 5 people and injuring dozens more. This was a place filled with families who had already their homes, and the blast caused chaos near a hospital where many were seeking shelter. Here is what we know so far.
At least 5 people have been killed and more than 30 injured in Gaza's Khan Yunis after an Israeli airstrike on Wednesday. The strike hit tents in the Al-Mawasi displacement zone, with subsequent explosions near the Kuwait hospital, causing panic among families in the area. 2 children were among those killed. The Israeli military said it was aiming at a Hamas operative but gave no further details. Hamas condemned the strikes as barbaric and indiscriminate, accusing Israel of violating the ceasefire and holding it fully responsible for the consequences. On Wednesday, 5 Israeli soldiers were wounded in the south of the Strip at Rafah. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu described that as a breach of the ceasefire that began in October. Gaza health officials say more than 350 Palestinians have been killed since the ceasefire took effect. Israeli authorities say Hamas has killed 3 Israeli soldiers in the same period.
Heading north, Ukraine faced another grim day. What happened in Ukraine last night is a kind of scene no one should have to wake up to. 9 bombs hit the city, including a residential building, and people were left digging through what was left of their homes. Here is what it looked like on the ground.
Тут как, это угловая, это кухня, да, у вас? Давайте, все,
I was sitting in a chair and everything fell on me. All the glass, all the doors, everything fell on me. That's all.
And while that's devastating, the UN is warning about a different kind of danger. The storms that hit Sri Lanka, Indonesia, and Vietnam last week weren't just devastating. The UN says they are a wake-up call. Warmer temperatures are making these intense tropical cyclones more common in places that barely see sun, which makes the damage even worse. Here is what the UN says countries need to do before the next one hits.
The United Nations warns global warming will lead to more frequent torrential downpours, such as those unleashed by the tropical storm that struck parts of Southeast and South Asia last week. The UN's World Meteorological Organization say these rare weather patterns will happen more often.
Tropical cyclones are rare so close to the equator, so it's not something that we see very often, and it means the impacts are magnified because local communities, have got no experience in this. Rising temperatures increase the potential risk of more extreme rainfall events because a warmer atmosphere holds more moisture. That's the law of physics. So we are seeing more extreme rainfall, and we will continue to do so in the future.
According to the UN, more than 1.4 million people in Sri Lanka have been affected by Cyclone Ditwa. The storm caused severe flooding and landslides, killing at least 410 people. Homes have been destroyed and communities cut off from essential services, while army and police teams search landslide-hit areas for victims. In Indonesia, heavy rains linked to tropical cyclone Senya have also caused deadly landslides and flooding in Sumatra. And Vietnam has faced weeks of exceptional rainfall, pushing rivers to historic highs. The UN says these events highlight an escalating climate threat and stress the need to strengthen preparedness before future extremes occur.
From extreme weather to something chilling on a different level. House Democrats just released new footage from Epstein's Island, and honestly, it's even creepier than people imagined. The rooms, the weird objects, the whole vibe, it's a lot. Let me show you the video so you can see what everyone is reacting to. Switching gears to national security. So Poland has had enough of drones flying around their power stations. They are now teaming up with the army to guard the whole energy network. It's a big move, but honestly, it makes sense with what has been happening. Here is the video.
Poland is ramping up security for its national power grid amid concerns over potential drone attacks and sabotage. The army will now work directly with the power operator to protect critical infrastructure, including transformer stations and high-voltage lines stretching across the country. A formal agreement was signed in Warsaw between the Polish Armed Forces and the Polish Power Grid, PSE.
This will involve assessing plans, security measures, joint exercises, and the participation of the military as an expert institution. It also means transferring experience from Ukraine.
We've had situations where attacks occurred, we can say it, attempts to interfere around the oil terminal managed by PERN. There were drone flights near power stations and transformer stations, so we want to draw on the best practices that the Polish armed forces have today to protect this infrastructure, which will continue to grow and which, those who want to harm Poland, constantly monitor and know is on the front line of our security.
NATO member Poland has faced a series of incidents since 2022, including drone incursions and a recent railway explosion, which authorities say demonstrate Russian state terrorism. The grid, which links Poland to neighboring countries like Lithuania, is a vital part of Europe's energy network and the focus of increased protection efforts. The agreement marks a major step in safeguarding Poland's energy network, combining military expertise with technical know-how to ensure the resilience of critical infrastructure against future threats.
Meanwhile, on a more diplomatic note, King Charles hosted Germany's president at Windsor, and the whole vibe was about friendship, shared history, and sticking together on global issues. Steinmeier even brought up the tree they planted in Berlin last year, and yes, it's still growing. Speaking of traditions, you know those fancy hand-blown Christmas ornaments? There is this small Polish workshop that turns blobs of glass into stunning Christmas ornaments, all by hand. And people around the world are obsessed. They drop new collections every year, but still keep the old traditions alive.
There are always new things, new shapes, new designs, and it's always a bit of a challenge because they're getting more and more intricate, so these designs are becoming more difficult. You really need to do this with passion, to put your heart into the glass. Otherwise you're not a glass blower, you're just a worker handling glass. But if you put your heart into it, the glass will give back.
So we are specialized in mouth-blown, hand-painted Christmas ornaments. This year will be our 30 years in business. We usually export to the United States of America and bit of for the European market, bit of Australia, and all around the world. Most time-consuming stage of production, I would say, each step of production is time-consuming because everything is made by hands.
And finally, if you need holiday vibes, Copenhagen is on another level. Colorful Newham, Tivoli, turned into a full winter wonderland, and that fancy hotel wrapped into lights like a giant Christmas present. And that's all for today. Don't forget to check our website at anews.tv and of course all our social media platforms. Back to you, Guy.
Vidan, great selection and lovely pictures to finish on as well. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, now to some other top stories from around the world. French President Emmanuel Macron is in Beijing for talks with China's President Xi Jinping, his fourth visit as Europe looks to recalibrate its economic and security ties with China. Well, Macron is also meeting China's senior leadership to address strained trade relations and urge progress on the Ukraine crisis. It's the second day of his three-day state visit. Here's more on that story.
French President Emmanuel Macron and China's President Xi Jinping pledged cooperation on Thursday across a range of global issues, including efforts to end the war in Ukraine and trade relations. The two leaders oversaw the signing of 12 cooperation agreements covering multiple sectors. President Xi said both sides had agreed to focus on 4 key areas, starting with strengthening political trust.
We all have agreed to focus on the following 4 areas. First, enhancing political mutual trust. Regardless of changes in the external environment, both sides should consistently demonstrate the independence and strategic vision of a great power, and strive to understand and support each other on issues related to their core interests and major concerns.
In his turn, French President Emmanuel Macron, keeping EU-China relations at the centre of his visit, called for a more balanced economic relationship.
Europe and China have a role to play in laying, alongside other partners, the foundations for fair and robust global economic governance, based on rules and not the law of the strongest. The imbalances that are accumulating today are unsustainable. They pose a risk of financial crises. They imperil our ability to grow together.
The war in Ukraine was a major point of discussion in Beijing. Macron urged China to support efforts for a ceasefire and to back a halt to strikes on critical infrastructure.
I hope that China could join our call and our efforts to achieve, at the earliest possibility, at the very least, a ceasefire in Ukraine, in the form of a moratorium of strikes targeting critical infrastructure.
In Beijing, Macron is also holding talks with Premier Li Qiang and China's top lawmaker, Zhao Leji, before travelling on Friday to the southwestern city of Chengdu.
Russia's President Vladimir Putin has come to Delhi for the first time in 4 years. The talks with Prime Minister Narendra Modi are expected to focus on energy, defence and trade, testing India's ability to balance relations with Moscow and Washington.
Russia's President Vladimir Putin begins a 2-day visit to India, his first in 4 years, aiming to reinforce a partnership that has shaped Moscow and Delhi's foreign policy for decades. The timing is highly sensitive. India has cut back on Russian crude under tightening Western sanctions, while the United States is urging Delhi to scale down its wider economic ties with Moscow. For the Kremlin, the visit is about securing 2 lifelines, energy and defence. India is still a major buyer of discounted Russian crude and one of the biggest customers for Russian-made weapons. Moscow also wants help easing pressure on its energy sector, where access to parts and technology has been restricted since the war in Ukraine. For India, the stakes are different. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is trying to preserve what he calls strategic autonomy, maintaining close ties with Russia while managing an increasingly fraught relationship with Washington.
The tariff imposed on Russia, on India by USA has slightly, unnerved us. Unnerved us in many ways because many of the traditional exporters are now out of job. The people dependent on those manufacturing garments, for example, are now jobless. So they are looking for avenues. The latest data also shows that we are diversifying. So why not diversify with Russia if they have the requirement of Indian goods, which earlier was being sold to, say, USA or other countries.
Analysts also expect the talks to result in new defence agreements. Russia has offered the Su-57 fifth-generation fighter, while India is also considering additional S-400 batteries, a move driven in part by regional competition with China and Pakistan.
And many of the arms that they are selling to us, we manufacture them and also sell to other countries. For example, BrahMos is being sold to Armenia and Philippines, right? So I don't think India would shy away just because there is a Trump tariff going on or there is a pressure from the Trump administration.
Alongside defence and energy, Modi wants to narrow a wide trade gap. Indian exports to Russia remain modest, despite record turnover driven by crude purchases. Both sides are exploring a free trade deal with the Eurasian Economic Union and cooperation in nuclear energy and shipping.
As the US continues mounting pressure on Venezuela through new military movements, a political fight is ongoing in Washington over presidential war powers. Lawmakers and military officials are signaling next steps that could shape US strategy and the stability of Latin America.
American troops are set to begin strikes on drug cartels' ground facilities in Latin America. That is according to the US President Donald Trump's remarks during a discussion with journalists in the Oval Office. A bipartisan group of senators on Wednesday introduced a war powers resolution seeking to halt what they describe as unauthorized US military hostilities in Venezuela under President Trump. The resolution, which now heads to the committee for consideration, argues that Congress has not approved military action in or against Venezuela, adding that the power rests exclusively with the legislative branch. Meanwhile, the US military is ramping up its presence in Puerto Rico, deploying Osprey aircraft, naval ships and additional personnel as Washington intensifies pressure on Venezuela. The build-up comes days after Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro confirmed a respectful and cordial phone call with Trump, which he framed as a potential opening for diplomacy.
I received a phone call and spoke with President Donald Trump. I can say that the conversation was in a respectful tone, and I can even say it was cordial between the US President and the President of Venezuela. I add that if this call means there are steps towards a respectful dialogue between states, between countries, then welcome dialogue, welcome diplomacy, because we will always seek peace.
It follows months of US actions targeting Venezuela, including strikes on alleged drug smuggling vessels, threats of military force, and the decision to label the Cartel de los Soles as a foreign terrorist organization.
There are renewed diplomatic signals from Washington as US negotiators engage with Russia and Ukraine in an attempt to shape a path towards peace. Now, while talks in Moscow left major issues unresolved, Washington is now turning its focus to Ukrainian leaders for the next steps. Here's more.
The White House has confirmed that US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff will meet Rustem Umerov, the head of Ukraine's National Security Council, in Miami on Thursday. The talks come after Witkoff held nearly 5 hours of discussions with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow earlier this week. The Kremlin said the meeting produced no compromise on ending the war in Ukraine, but that Putin was prepared to keep working to find a compromise. US President Donald Trump described those talks, which also included his son-in-law Jared Kushner, as reasonably good, but warned it was too early to predict any outcome. He said Russia very strongly wants a deal.
I don't know what the Kremlin's doing. I can tell you that they had a reasonably good meeting with President Putin. We're going to find out. It's a war that should have never been started. It's a war, if I were president, we had a rigged election. If I were president, that war would have never happened. It's a terrible thing, but I thought they had a very good meeting yesterday with President Putin. We'll see what happens.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed that discussions with the United States would take place in the coming days. He stressed that any negotiation must be backed with pressure on Russia.
Everything is developing quite effectively right now. At the meetings in Geneva and in Florida, Ukraine was heard and listened to, and this is important. We expect it will continue this way. Only by taking Ukraine's interests into account is a dignified peace possible.
The talks in Moscow followed several days of US meetings with Ukrainian and European officials. Previously, there were concerns that the original US brokered 28-point peace plan leaned too far toward Russian demands. Kremlin advisor Yuri Ushakov said some of the ideas were more or less acceptable, but others were criticized by Putin. According to reports, there are two major issues that continue to be contentious: the future of occupied Ukrainian territory and security guarantees for Kiev.
Poland is stepping up the protection of its national power grid by teaming up with the military. Under a new agreement signed in Warsaw, the armed forces will assist the Polish power grid in securing more than 16,000 kilometers of high voltage lines and more than 110 transformer stations.
Poland is ramping up security for its national power grid amid concerns over potential drone attacks and sabotage. The army will now work directly with the power operator to protect critical infrastructure, including transformer stations and high voltage lines stretching across the country. A formal agreement was signed in Warsaw between the Polish Armed Forces and the Polish Power Grid, PSE.
This will involve assessing plans, security measures, joint exercises, and the participation of the military as an expert institution. It also means transferring experience from Ukraine.
We've had situations where attacks occurred, we can say it, attempts to interfere around the oil terminal managed by PERN. There were drone flights near power stations and transformer stations, so we want to draw on the best practices that the Polish armed forces have today to protect this infrastructure, which will continue to grow and which those who want to harm Poland constantly monitor and know is on the front line of our security.
NATO member Poland has faced a series of incidents since 2022, including drone incursions and a recent railway explosion, which authorities say demonstrate Russian state terrorism. The grid, which links Poland to neighbouring countries like Lithuania, is a vital part of Europe's energy network and the focus of increased protection efforts. The agreement marks a major step in safeguarding Poland's energy network, combining military expertise with technical know-how to ensure the resilience of critical infrastructure against future threats.
Well, that does bring us to the end of Prime Time. Do join us again tomorrow evening for more insight, analysis and perspective from right here in Baku and around the world. And from all of us here at A News, thanks for watching.